Happy Wednesday, everybody. So we're picking up today with, after our discussion of our first two Native American nations that inhabited Minnesota, the Ojibwe and the Dakota, we're going to move on to probably one of the most, I'm not going to say important, but definitely changing events in Minnesota's history. And that's when Europeans finally showed up. Now, we're going to be talking mostly about French Europeans that show up. There were people from different nations. Eventually, very large Scandinavian population shows up, German, many, right? But for the most part, especially very early on, it was mostly French people or people that spoke very similar language. There were some Belgians too, but that's a long story. But anyway, we're going to get into that. I just want you to stop though really quick before we move into that and go and take a look at the warm up if you haven't done it. This is completely you giving me your opinion. Okay. So as long as you're explaining in complete sentences and giving it your best effort, you're going to get full credit. Okay. I know a lot of people are going to look at it and see, oh, I don't know, Mr. Plog, why these two groups would trade with one another. It makes no sense to me. Well, give it your best shot, right? The only way that you can get anything less than 2 points is if you either don't try or don't write in complete sentences. So give it your best. Okay. So really quickly, I came across this document that I thought was really cool because when we're talking about the fur trade, obviously you're coming into contact with people that are going to be speaking a different language, right? The Anishinaabe or the Ojibwe had their own language. The Dakota had their own language. And obviously the French people spoke French, right? So I found this really interesting sheet that shows some common or useful phrases in the Ojibwe language, which would have been very helpful for the French people when they showed up and they wanted to trade with them, right? So you have like saying hello or hi would be buzu or anin. I think anin is the female greeting and buzu is the male greeting. I don't know that for sure though. That's going to be mean a little bit. Let's eat. We see nida. I always thought this was interesting. I don't know why it says email me because I have a feeling that the Ojibwe in the 1500s didn't have email. But if you wanted to email them, OZB Aigitamawashin. So it's pretty cool. I don't know if you want to take a look at it. I'm going to have it posted on here. But I do think it is important to realize that if you are going to be working closely with someone, it probably is going to help to learn at least the important parts of their language, right? I know I had a lot of friends that went into international business and they had to take a lot of foreign language classes in order to be able to do it, right? So it's just something that we don't think about. All right, make sure that you've got your notes pulled up. Remember, printing it, definitely the best way to go about it if you can, right? But if you can't, you can pull it up, make a copy, if it ever lets me, and then you can pull it over and have it side by side with the video, okay? All right. Let's get into that PowerPoint. All right, so the fur trade and the first Europeans. Oh, by the way, I haven't even said this, but we're going through basically an entire textbook that's supposed to take a whole year in like the course of about 3 weeks. So if you're wondering why some of these things look like they're kind of well planned or like there are certain worksheets that look like they're all from the same stuff, that's why. Okay, so here we go. In the early 1700s, that's when this map was made. And the reason I put it on here is to show you exactly what European powers were in the United States from the very beginning onward, right? And as you can see, the French are going to dominate this area right here. Now, this area up here, they're going to call that New France. That's going to be their colony. But eventually what's going to happen is they're going to move down into what we know as the United States today, and they're going to call it Louisiana. Now, obviously, we have a state, Louisiana in the United States today. But at the time, they actually named it after their king, whose name was, although it looks like Louis, it's pronounced Louis. And he was like the absolute ruler, had 100% power, and they wanted to make him really happy. So they thought, well, what a great thing to do. Let's just name it after the king. He's sure to love that. And later on, it ended up becoming something they had to get rid of. And we'll talk about that tomorrow. But in the beginning, it provided one very, very important resource that the French wanted. Okay. So people are making the trek over the Atlantic Ocean, right? And those times it wasn't safe. And in a lot of cases, people didn't make it, whether it was through sickness or bad seas, whatever it was. But people were still trying their fortune out here because they knew that if they were able to make it, they could be become very successful people. And in a lot of cases, maybe they weren't very successful back in France, and this gave them an opportunity to start over. For whatever reason, around the late 1500s, France was doing pretty good financially, so they started exploring in what they called the New World. Now, they're going to show up fishermen, explorers, we'll know them as voyagers. They're going to show up on the Atlantic coast. Don't worry, I'll come back. So we're talking about over here in New France. But eventually, they are going to start traveling down what we know as the St. Lawrence River into the Great Lakes. And once they started traveling to the Great Lakes, they found a whole bunch of things that they could make money off of, right? Whether it's an unlimited amount of timber or trees, there's going to be animals to hunt, there's going to be open land once they clear it out, very rich soil if they want to start farming. But in the beginning, it really had much more to do with the fact of an abundance of animals and not necessarily just to eat. Really what we're looking at here is animals that have specific types of fur that were going to be very, very, very popular in Europe for a specific reason. Now, you're going to see that in trading posts, Native Americans are going to start trading with these European traders. And it's really going to be a great system, at least for both in the beginning, right? Because Native Americans had never seen or heard a firearm until Europeans showed up. And when they saw what they could do in terms of making their hunting easier, that was totally what they wanted. They wanted to get those things because it was going to make their lives easier. They also had never seen metal tools, period. So rather than cutting down a tree with a stone or a wooden axe, they have this iron that's going to do the job like 10 times easier. So the Europeans have all of these manufactured goods that the Native Americans are like, holy crud, that's going to completely change my life. And then the Europeans want those furs. Well, what do they want it for? Mainly because fur clothing was very popular at the time, but the beaver pelt is going to be the one that they want the most. And why do they want it? Because it's waterproof. Beaver fur is waterproof. And especially if you're in London, a place where it's considered a drought if it doesn't rain in 3 weeks, i.e. it rains all the time, having waterproof clothes would be really neat, right? Now, the Europeans were not skilled in hunting these beavers. These were brand new animals to them that they had never encountered before. The natives, on the other hand, they knew it very, very well. So this right here is an example of a beaver trap that they would have used. I've seen these in fish traps before too, where you have the animal walk into it and the hole will open up, and then maybe it'll be like some food that they would eat or something. And then once they get to a certain point, it would close in the back. The animal tries to turn around to get out and it's trapped. Okay. Is it kind of sad? Yeah. But at the same time, holy cow, is that a really, really, really smart idea to make something like that, which is probably just made out of wicker materials, right? Like straw and stuff like that. So eventually there are going to be really two main groups of Europeans that end up showing up in the New World, right? We're going to have explorers, or what we're going to call as voyagers. Those are people who are going to want to trade. And then we have missionaries. And the fur traders, the voyagers, they're going to be spread out all over the place. And in a lot of cases, these missionaries are people that are going to be traveling along with them because they want to be protected. And what missionaries are, plain and simple, they're holy people, right? They want to meet these native tribes or these native nations, and they want to convert them to Christianity. Obviously, Christianity is a religion that tries to convert people. They believe it's a mission that they're going to make people's lives better if they convert them, right? But there's also a second purpose, right? Because if they can convert the Native Americans, they're going to have the same religious traditions, and that's going to interweave them more into French society, and it's going to make them more dependent on one another, right? So we see these first explorers, Radisson and Groseilliers, they're going to be there with some missionaries, and eventually in 1680, we have a guy come to this area, one of the first Europeans that's known to do so, and his name was Louis Hennepin. There's a county I know called Hennepin County. I wonder if it's named after him. It is. And in 1680, he had been here for a couple years up to that point, and he wrote this book that was sent back to Europe about how incredible the Minnesota area is, about how there's abundant resources, rivers, beautiful lakes, and land that people could farm and start their lives over. And even though some of it was true, in a lot of cases, he exaggerated things to make it look better than it actually was. You could almost call it like an advertisement, right? Because they wanted to get people from France to relocate so France itself could expand. So that book was so popular back in Europe that Louis Hennepin became like the very first person that we see as like an important developer of this area. And that's why Hennepin County still has his name. Right here, this is just another shot of what a missionary might do. It looks like, from what I can tell, I don't think this was the Ojibwe or the Dakota. Actually, I think these were Spanish priests. But the reason I wanted to show it to you is because this is how converting would start, right? They have a new baby child that was just born, and they want it to be blessed so that it has a long, healthy life, right? Because infant mortality was very high back then. So they allowed these priests to either baptize or at least bless the child. And in a lot of cases, it was acts like that that started to gain the trust between the missionaries and the natives. And in a lot of cases, as long as the missionaries treated the natives well, they were very successful in what they did. This is just a copy of Hennepin's book right here. It's obviously translated because he was Belgian, so it would have been in Flemish. So this is translated to English, but I actually found this and I looked online and you can actually buy the text. I'm not going to, but I do think it's kind of interesting that they still have it and they still sell copies of it. So what's a Voyager? Each year in early May, ice is going to break on the St. Lawrence River. Let's go back really quick. St. Lawrence River right here. Most important river that connects the Great Lakes out to the Atlantic Ocean through New France or French Canada. The Voyagers, when they start their work, they're going to head down towards the Great Lakes, right? And their goal is that they're going to stop at trading posts. They're going to meet with natives in the hope that they can buy as many furs as they possibly can. Now, obviously here, this is what a reenactor. This is not a real Voyager, but this is what they would have dressed like in the time. This would have been what was considered like the 1700s work clothes. Now, these trips are not only dangerous, but they're very long. I mean, you're traveling by hand a good, hundreds and hundreds, maybe even 1,000 miles. So in a lot of cases, they would have their own songs that they would sing, that they would create in order to keep their minds occupied, because unfortunately they didn't have their Nintendo Switches that we do now. So just really quick here, these are all of the trade routes where all the furs are going to come in from Canada. We've got Minnesota here. A lot of these guys were going to stop at either Fort William or Grand Portage, but you could also go up the rivers even further and stop at other forts that would have plenty of furs for them, right? So they could really go a long way if they needed to. So this is a song here where I'm not going to read through it, but this would have been the lyrics to one of the songs that they would have sang as they were going up the river. Believe me, you don't want to hear me sing like at all. That's going to ruin your day. So we won't do that. But if you wanted to, this is just an example of some song lyrics. Feel free. I don't know, drop your own beat to it. But all right. So tomorrow we're going to pick up with the Louisiana Purchase. Make sure that you're doing your exit ticket. Just one last thing that I want to bring up is that we actually have an optional worksheet that we can do. And it's going to be like you becoming a fur trader, right? Now, usually when we have normal school, I do this. We probably spend good half a class period doing this with students, and it's a lot of fun. But what we're going to do is, if you want to do this, number one, it's entirely optional. But you are going to need somebody else, whether it's a classmate or sibling, parent, someone who lives with you. This activity does not work unless you have two people. Okay, so I'm just going to pull it up now. It's going to be posted on the Google Classroom right here. I need to scan it because I don't like the document that I have now. It's a long story, but yeah, I don't like it. So I'll put it in there by the time that you see this. So you are going to have to choose a perspective. Okay, you can either be a fur trader or you can be a native. Now, the goal is that you're going to be trading with one another. Now, if you end up being the fur trader, you've got three things. If you're the fur trade clerk, you have a trap, a blanket, and a package of beads. And if you're an Ojibwe, or if you're a native, you're going to have 14 beaver pelts, or you also have a bag of 7 ducks. Those are the things that you have available to trade. Now, there are 3 options that you can choose. And for the two people, you have to come to the same conclusion, right? You can't decide, oh, one person wants to trade for option B and the other one is A. That doesn't make any sense because you have to come to a mutual agreement. Otherwise, you can't trade. So you have three options. Option A is you're going to trade the 14 beaver pelts for one trap, one blanket, and the package of beads. Okay. Option B is going to be the 7 ducks. And then option C is going to be no trade at all. Now, it's going to tell you for each side what you get out of it. The goal is that it's giving you 3 different reasons why it would be why you should trade, and then it'll give you a score. The goal is that you try to find the highest score that you possibly can combine for these 3. So you're going to like add them up. So like right here, each one is going to be rated 1 out of 5, depending on how it fulfills a need for you. So if you're the fur trade clerk, if you're going to trade the 14 beaver pelts for the blanket, the package of beads, what does it do for bringing in valuable goods? Well, it rates it a 5 out of 5 because beaver pelts are super, super, super expensive, right? And they're going to make a lot of money. So something you can give it a try. You see, as you're adding it up, you're looking for probably the highest number that you both can get, right? So have fun with it, give it a shot. If you are having a hard time understanding it, or if you don't want to do it, remember, it is optional, but I just wanted to give you that option because I do think that it is important that we try some of these trading skills, right? I mean, it's important to reenact some of the things that we're talking about. Okay, well, in that case, I think I'm going to sign off. Just really quickly, let's go and look at the exit ticket. Once again, you have 4 questions. Hopefully, maybe some of you started doing it where you're splitting the screen so you can answer it during the video. But remember, make sure you're writing in complete sentences, number those responses. Most of the answers should be right out of the notes. Okay, have a wonderful day, everyone, and we'll see you tomorrow for our last day of the week when we talk about the Louisiana Purchase.